and welcome to the 4th episode of the Developers Zen podcast, where we talk about everything in the games industry, but from the eyes of two indie developers. My name is Siavash, aka Rainy, and joining me is my co-host Sydney. And yeah, we come at you after a pretty big delay. I blame production.
It's my fault.
Which is wait, why?
I'm the one that
right, it
messed
is.
up yeah, it's
You're
totally
right,
my
it
fault.
is.
Yeah. So
right, well, do you want to tell everyone why?
So we recorded an episode in January. We did. We sat down. We did the whole thing. It was great. We were in top form. We were talking about all the chaos of last year. We talked about all the cool indie games that came out. We talked about the Game Awards. It was a good podcast. But my sound sucked because for some reason it was pulling sound from my webcam and not my microphone. And we didn't find out until we were done. And Rainy was trying to put it together. And I was like, just release it. And then he showed me how bad it was. I was like, no, we can't. And we were going to re-record it.
It's just way too bad.
Yeah. We wanted to re-record it, but that's really hard. Because you're constantly like, oh, like, what did I say last time? And am I going to be good enough this time?
As much as I want to gush about how much I enjoyed Baldur's Gate and how much they deserve their win,
you got it out of your system.
Yeah, well, true, fair enough. But also, as we were talking about pre-podcast, we obviously in the previous episodes we have been covering a lot of stuff that are just like news, right? Yeah. So they have an expiry date. You can't talk about them a month later. In this case, a few. If you wanna be funny about it, you can say a year. But we can't really cover
Doesn't make
Game
sense
Awards
anymore.
as much as we can cover like, oh, what went wrong with Game Awards this past year and what they can improve, that kind of conversation. But we can't really go into detail anymore. Yeah. So that's a bit sad, but at the same time, I think we have a pretty good good idea at what direction we'd like to take these podcasts to keep them more regular.
We want to do better this year.
Yeah, we want to keep them a bit shorter, more bite-sized. Yeah. And I think persistence is really the name of the game. We're trying to keep them as regular as we can. And we were just talking that we should not make any promises, so I'm not going to say anything on that front.
Not only that, we want to make sure they're interesting, right? So I don't want it to be just another perspective on stuff that other people are talking about. I want you guys to get the content that you actually want. So kind of like with my game design philosophy is like, okay, well, why are people doing it that way? And do we have to do it that way? And can we just do something that works better for us? So I kind of like the idea of like being the voice of the people, if that makes sense. Because I think you and I are so fresh to this still. I mean, okay, yeah, it's been 3 years, but at the same time, like, we're still gamers.
Game design, game making.
Yeah, we're still gamers, and we know what it was like to not know anything, I think, and so we can kind of still give that perspective of, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but we want to do better for the people, for you, the people.
Yeah, so I was always the advocate to talk about news, but Sydney always wanted to talk about, and that's a very good word you used before, evergreen topics.
I stole
that were
it.
Just not outdate.
I stole that from Josh Striface.
So very good.
Evergreen.
Thank you, Josh Striface.
I steal a lot of things from Josh. He probably doesn't know that we exist, but thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, if these podcasts ever get big enough, I'd love to have him as a guest, because he has a plethora of knowledge on MMORPGs, and I've never played one. Beside maybe a very few hours of Final Fantasy 14.
You've never?
No, I've only played FF4. I played ESO during this beta period. Okay. And I was one of the closed beta participants, which made me very happy.
What is ESO?
Elder Scrolls Online. Sorry.
Oh, Elder Scrolls. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I don't know why I'm so surprised. I've only ever played one, and I don't think a lot of people are going to consider it a good MMO, so...
Oh, I know which one it is.
Yeah, but it was so good, and people crap on it all the time.
It looked very good. It's D&D, by the way. What was it called?
It's Dungeons & Dragons Online. It's just
DDO.
Okay. Yeah. And it was 3.5, and it was good.
I don't think 5e existed back then, did it?
5e was just coming out when I played it. And we all hated 5, and we liked to, okay, we're gonna deviate real quick. When Wizards of the Coast decided that they were gonna do 5e, the first thing they put out was called D&D Essentials. Okay? And this was like, this is gonna be the new Dungeons and Dragons for everybody. And it was like a pared down, really lame version of it. And we all hated it. And for people who had played encounters at stores where we like have been doing this a certain way for a long time, then they gave us Essentials, and like all the new modules were in Essential. It sucked. We hated it. So a lot of us kind of rallied against 5e at the beginning.
Is that what Pathfinder came out?
No, Pathfinder's way before that. Pathfinder is 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah, Pathfinder's
I'm
a
very
result
new
of
to
them
D&D,
making
by the
4.
way. So just so everybody knows, so I'm
It's
not
funny 'cause
initiated in any of this.
Comparatively, so am I. Like I didn't get into Dungeons and Dragons until 4 had come out, but like that was before Critical Role happened. So
Oh yeah.
I feel like for us,
You count ancient at that point.
yeah.
because-
For us at the time, like you were new if you came in at 4, and like the OGs were people who'd played before 4, and then Critical Role happened. That became like the new, like AD. ADBC. Like,
yeah.
it got moved to
That's
Critical
a
Role because
new
of popular.
era. Yeah.
So I'm in this weird in between of like I'm not quite old enough to know all the real old stuff, but I at least was in it before Critical Role happened. So I guess I get a little bit of credit. I don't know.
And I don't have this news officially. I heard it yesterday. Actually, we were playing a campaign, and I heard it yesterday from one of my friends that apparently they're also doing something new, a new edition that is like a pared down version.
Of course they are.
That is like more, I guess, easier to understand for people who are new to it, because a lot of people are flocking to D&D again. Okay, yeah.
That's exactly what
And apparently
Essentials
this
was.
new one is supposed to work better online, because a lot of people are playing online these days.
I'll tell you a secret.
Fair enough.
We're not affiliated with Wizards of the Coast. We have nothing to do with Hasbro. I don't ever plan to, so I have no problem talking crap about them. Especially because I was one of the DMs for a while.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast has one goal and one goal only. Making money.
True.
So they're going to keep releasing new editions, because every time there's a new edition, guess what you have to buy? A brand new freaking book.
Yeah.
So...
And now they sell those digitally too, so, you know, they don't even have to worry about
yeah.
it being a thing. And this comes from somebody who has a master subscription on D&D Beyond, so...
Exactly.
But...
That's my point,
yeah.
exactly. Anyway.
But I do agree on this as well. Anyway, yeah, we should move on ahead. So yeah, evergreen topics, to bring it back to what we were talking about. So we're going to talk about more of those, and specifically, essentially, what we are going through at the moment, because I think we're so new to this comparative to everybody else. We've only been making games for the past 3 years, and
only
I
one
personally
game.
only count and only one game, and I personally only count the last year as my professional year, because I've just been learning so much. Yeah,
that's
because
fair.
I don't know, just kind of floating around before that.
The imposter syndrome finally went away.
I think so. I think maybe a little bit, yeah. But also, the weird thing is, although we are very fresh and new to this, there are a lot of people who are even newer than us.
Yeah.
That could use our experiences. And again, I'm not going to claim we're experts at this. We are not. But what we can do is that we can share the experiences of what we went through and tell you this is what went wrong, and maybe in your case you can avoid it.
Yeah. And maybe you're better than us and you already know this, even though you're new. But
yeah.
we just kind of want to share what we went through and why it didn't work. Or why maybe it did work, and if it did work, it's only because we got lucky. Really.
Yeah. Or like what we would have done differently, I guess.
Yeah, if knowing what we know
hindsight.
now, and that's kind of that's what it is. Knowing what we know now, if we could go back to the beginning and start over, what would we do differently? I think that's really what we want to talk about, right?
And we're not just gonna say do more pre-production, because we say that every time.
I mean, even though
it's gonna be actually a bit more detailed. It's gonna be more detailed.
More pre-production, guys. So let's say you are in college, or you are a server at a restaurant, or you just lost your job or something, and you're
or
looking
you
to
have
make
a
a
very
game.
well-paying job and you're thinking of
and you're
leaving it
bored.
because you hate it and you
Yeah.
want to make games.
Let's say you want to just make games.
That's actually very common, weirdly.
What do you do? Where do you start? Where do you, and I worked a lot of conventions last year, and I got this question a lot of just like, well, where do I start? What do I do? And I always told people, just go download Unreal and just start. Like, really, that's the advice, is start now. Like, there's literally no reason, there's no monetary thing holding you back. Unreal can run on a lot of computers.
So many tools are available for free.
Yeah, if you don't have a computer, you can't make games. So we need to just talk about that first. There is a bit of like,
get a computer.
There is a little bit of an entry barrier, which is you need to have a computer. But it doesn't have to be a great computer, does it?
No. I mean, I started working on SunnySide on a, I want to say crappy laptop, but I think at the time it was somewhat decent. It had a 1050 in it, which is pretty old by today's standards, but this was 2020, so I guess even 2020 that was pretty low. And but it got me to where I am today, and that's a very good point, because the biggest thing about trying to get into games industry, especially if you're not in the industry, or if you are doing something else and you really want to make games on the side, is really asking the question of how to get into it. Kind of results in the answer of, but what do you want out of game making?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because there's so many pathways you can take. You can be a small, super small, I'm talking about, like a micro game developer on itch.io that has a massive audience because you create just little tiny toys that people really enjoy. And there's so many horror games, for instance, in that area that are in that case. You don't need to worry about business. You don't need to worry about hiring people. You're just gonna do it on the side. You're just gonna enjoy it and have fun. But if your intention is to start a business, start a studio, then that's a different question. But you can't
it's a big
answer
conversation at that point.
Yeah, you can't answer the intention question before actually getting your hands dirty. So, like Sydney said, just grab an engine.
Just do it.
Or if you don't want to actually do any programming, just start reading about game design. Grab a pen and a pencil, a pencil and a notebook, and just write down ideas, draw them.
The question,
and then you finally kind of
down to
come across what you want out of game design.
What it comes down to is, and I think this is across the board, is loving video games is not enough. Yeah. You can't just like playing video games. You have to inherently be a creative person. You have to, like, so you can't just look at people make games like, oh, that looks like fun, I want to do that. Like, even if you're working on the biz dev side of things, even if you never touch the game at all, even if you're just marketing, you still have to be an inherently creative person. It's a very creative field. And there's some crossover, but loving games isn't enough. So you need to first ask yourself, like, do you want to ruin the magic of being a gamer? Like, if you want to be a gamer, cool. But once you take that step to the other side, you're not a gamer anymore. Like,
and it's not necessarily that it's going to ruin your experiences of playing games. It's just going to be a very different.
It's a different experience. Yeah.
You look at very different things when playing games.
Yeah. So that's really the big question to start with is, are you sure you want to do this? And if you do want to do it, why do you want to do it? And then what do you want to do? Do you want to be an artist? Do you want to be a 3D artist? Do you want to be an animator? Do you want to work in rigging? Do you want to work in set design or whatever?
Games industry is one of the most versatile industries.
Oh my God, yeah.
You can join the games industry with any skill set and it would almost always work. And creativity, very good point. And I could be naive for saying this. I could be very young for saying this, but I don't believe there are people out there who are not creative. I don't think there's one human being that isn't creative. You're just creative in different things.
I'm related to some of them. Fair enough.
But I think creativity is something that takes a lot of interest in the first place.
Yeah.
You can't force creativity; it just kind of happens on its own. But if you have a lot of it, and that's how it kind of felt for me, I guess. You get to a point that you have a lot of creativity kind of bottled up in you, and you want to just throw it at something.
But let's say
it could be games industry, but it could be the place.
Let's say you don't because here's the thing with me is even though I would count myself a creative person, I've never been drawn towards any creative mediums. I've never had the desire to draw. I've never had the desire to make music. I've never, like, cooking is about as close as I got, and writing,
right,
which are creative, but it's not something you like think of like, oh, I can make video games, I know how to cook. Like, it's not something you correlate, you know.
You went immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I made it work, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, creativity comes in all shapes and forms, and just because, like, I bet, you know, I'm probably not the only person who felt this way of, you know, there's no place for me in video games. I'm not artistic. I don't know how to program. I don't know how to do music. At the time, wasn't a writer, not a professional writer anyway, didn't have a degree. So for me, it was like, well, there's no place for me in that realm. And we're both here to tell you there is. If you want there to be, there is. You just have to find it. You really have to go looking for it, and you have to find your space in this space, because it exists. You just have to really, really want it. So let's say, okay, let's say you want to do it. Okay, well, where do you start? And I think it comes down to, like, okay, depending on what thing you want to do, wherever you see yourself, you have to just start. Like, there's no area of making video games that has a barrier of entry. Even if you want to just write, there's nothing stopping you from sitting down and writing a story. If you want to...
I know we said computer earlier, but I don't think that's actually true either, because
not really.
There's a lot of games just start, like, as board games too, and then turn digital.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point. So
you can just grab pieces of paper and, just write them.
Yeah, you know, if you want to be the person who designs games, you don't really need the computer. You can, like Rainy said, make a board game, make a card game, make a game with your friends, make a dice game. Like, there's nothing stopping you from just creating game mechanics. If you want to be a writer, sit down and write stories. If you want to, honestly, play Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to be a writer, that's like
that's how D&D kind of came around, actually, if you think about it, because it's like
exactly
one game you can play without anything.
Yeah. You know, if you want to be an artist, sit down and draw, or pick up some digital art programs. There are a ton of them that are free. If you want to be a 3D modeler, download Blender. Look at some Blender tutorials online. If you want to be the programmer, download Unreal and watch some videos online. Like, everything that you can want to do in games exists as a tutorial somewhere on YouTube. Like, guaranteed. Unless you're getting into the bigger aspects, which we could talk about later. But, like, just
almost
start.
Every area you can find a tutorial from.
Just start. Yeah.
Maybe the most obscure part of game design, or not design, let me rephrase that. Game making or games industry is probably business.
Yeah.
But at that point, I don't know. I feel like
point.
Business in general is just kind of a very hard to get into.
Yeah, and I do think at some point we should do a podcast just about the biz dev aspect of it and what's involved, and
that'll be your episode.
Yeah, thanks. You know, we can get somebody in here to talk about their experience in biz dev and what they've had to go through, but the heart of it is nothing should be stopping you from starting, like, right now. Go and just do it. But let's say you have started. Let's say you are a programmer and you've made a whole bunch of little games and you've put them on itch and you've experimented with all that stuff, but you want to take it to the next level. You want to start making money. Well, what do you have to do now? That's a whole other process, right? So what did you do? You made a Kickstarter.
SunnySide? Yeah. Did a Kickstarter. Yeah. Honestly, I think if we go back in time, and my memory is very cloudy on this, but I think the thing that pushed me to want to put the game on Kickstarter, because newsflash, I had done it once for SunnySide, another game with the same name. It was a very different game. It was a mobile game, but it was called SunnySide and it was a farming game, and I put it on Kickstarter and it failed, actually. Yeah. But like a year after that, I came back and did it again, and it worked. So again, if you fail at it, don't worry, don't close the book forever. It would work. It will work if you try again, most likely. If it doesn't, try again. So, so I remember sharing stuff about the game on Reddit, and it got a lot of traction on there. Shout out to Unreal Reddit forums. I forget what it's actually called. Unreal. I don't think they call it Unreal Slackers anymore. That was a Discord, but it's just called Unreal Engine. I think that's a Reddit forum. Yeah, but I put some posts on there. And it got a lot of attention, and a lot of people joined our Discord. And I think at the time we had about 200 members,
and
that was enough to push me. Yeah. That was quite a lot. Yeah, that's quite a lot of people. And at that time, it pushed me to want to then do a Kickstarter. But the one thing that pushed me the most was that I was just hanging out in a dev server with a bunch of other people, and I saw this dev that came in and asked some questions, and he actually had a Kickstarter up at the time that was successful, already had hit the goal, and it had a few more days and they were getting more donations. So I just sat with them and I had a chat with them, and they just kind of took away all of my fears and barriers that I had, and just told me to go and do it. So yeah, I did the Kickstarter and it worked pretty well.
Now we can say though that you probably got lucky.
I got lucky, but also I asked a lot of people for help and promotions. Don't worry about asking. And I know some servers and stuff are wary about self-promotion, and I know self-promotion looks cringy from a distance, but it will work if you do it. And I went ahead and asked
within the parameters of whatever platform.
And actually, funny enough, I went to the Harvest Moon Reddit, I went to their Facebook groups, and I asked the admins, I was like, am I allowed to do this? I just want to share about this game that I've been working on. Surprisingly, nobody said no to me. That's awesome. So I just went ahead and did it. And again, I got lucky, but I was very nice. I was super nice. And they allowed me to do it. And the biggest traffic that SunnySide got on Kickstarter, probably 50% of his funding, was people coming from Facebook. Just because I shared it on Facebook groups of people that were playing farming games. So ask people, and don't worry about trying things, even if it means opening a Kickstarter.
The thing I will say is, I think also in a way you got lucky because of when you were doing it. It was in the middle of the pandemic. People were starting to realize that farming games were going to be the next thing. And so there was a lot of interest around farming games. If you were to do the exact same thing now, I don't think you'd have the same reaction that you did. Because now the market's oversaturated.
Yeah, and I always talked about the fact that cross-promotion is huge, and it helped a lot. Again, shout out to Overmagica, Claudia. We did a lot of cross-promotions together, and that was one of the things that brought SunnySide up. And we didn't do cross-promotions with Coral Island. Coral was already had a very established fan base at that time, so I was even a bit scared to message them. I did, but it probably got buried under a lot of different messages. We didn't cross-promote with each other, but at the same time, SunnySide still got recommended to people who were already backing Coral Island, so it kind of pushed us up at the same time. And although they were technically competitors at the same time on the same platform, they, in a weird way, they pushed us up.
You had like a perfect storm of like things going right, but I think if I were to take that into like what's some real advice we can give people, not just what worked for you, but what do I think would continue to work for people, is one, let's say you want to sit down and make a game. Every idea is not going to work. You might have a great idea and you might think it's great, and you might have some friends who are going to tell you it's a great idea, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is. You really have to go out and do some market research. You have to find out if there are other games that have already done the thing that you want to do. You have to look at why they did them and how close you are to what they already did. So let's say you want to go out and make another Disco Elysium, right? Really successful RPG, you know, kind of, put down its, foot in the record book as like, this is going down in history. But nobody could really try to make that game. It worked because it was the people who made it, and you can't really try to do that again. And if you did try to do that again, I don't think it would work. Because one, you're just going to get compared to Disco Elysium, and if you're not as good as or better than that game, then it's not going to work. So you have to... we were just
going to call you the XX knockoff.
Yeah,
whatever other game was more
it's just
successful.
Disco Elysium, but it's been reskinned, or it's Disco Elysium in a different setting, or it's, even farm games get the same problem. All farm games are Stardew Valley. So
and
you always
have
separate yourself.
You always have the debuff of people who are already fans of these other games compare you to those games, but not only compare you, but kind of downplay your game, even if it is doing better. But they will do it because they're fans of that game. I think honestly, a lot of people in that position would, because they just love the thing they love. They want to validate their feelings about that game. So they're like, okay, this is never going to be better than that. So, what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to arrive at is that don't be precious about your ideas.
No.
Keep them open to change.
Yes.
Ideas mutate so much through their life cycle. That is part of their life cycle. And if you try to stop it, a Zelda 2 will happen. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, Google it. Just watch a YouTube video about why Zelda 2 failed. And see what Shigeru Miyamoto said about it.
That's a great point, is that if you're making art, if you're an artist, if you're making games for yourself, it's a hobby, right? And as long as it's a hobby, you can do whatever the heck you want. You can just completely remake Stardew Valley and nobody's going to care because it's just for you and maybe for your friends. The absolute second you want to make money off of it, you're not making it for yourself anymore. You're now making it for other people, and you have to recognize that. If you don't recognize that you're making this for other people, you're going to fail. Because everybody doesn't have your interests, and that's a great point of, like, don't be precious about your ideas, because your ideas might not be what people want. That's okay.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
But if you want to make money off of it,
it's very easy to do that as artists too.
Yeah.
Because you obviously you're putting your heart and soul into it, and you think it's the perfect thing because you are making it with all those parameters. But like you said, at the end of the day, it is if your intention is for people to play it, then yeah, you're making it for them.
You have to let go. You really have to let go and just say, okay, what's best for others? What are they gonna want? What are they gonna respond to? What's gonna convince them to actually buy it? And you have to be very realistic about that. So, you know, let's say you, whoever's watching this, wants to make a farming game. My advice, don't do it. and I'll tell you why. And I talked about this with somebody the other day. I think for your first game, a farming game is the absolute worst choice. Because it is too complicated. The fandom is way too passionate. There are too many really good games to be compared to, and it's going to be so hard to set yourself apart that you're going to honestly run out of steam before you finish. It's not a quick, simple turnaround. It's not something you can just make and put out there. It has so many mechanics that all work together. It's not linear, so you have to account for a lot more stuff.
Now, just to be clear, we're talking about a farming game.
Farming game.
A game with farming mechanics.
Exactly, yeah. This is, you know, like Stardew Valley, like Harvest Moon, like SunnySide, like Coral Island, a farming-specific video game. It's a lot for your first time. If you are experienced, you've made games, sure, go for it. If this is your first time, make a platformer. Make something simple. Make a point and click. Make a little, you know, a tiny RPG or
games. Actually,
there's a new. Easy.
It's not necessarily a genre, but there's a new type of game that has emerged for the past few years, actually. And I can kind of connect it to what we were talking about earlier, that whatever kind of background you come from, you could work it into game making. And it's the fact that we're not in the day and age that people are just playing first-person shooters with a grainy, brownish color scheme. We're in a day and age where people are playing very, very different types of games. So you can almost gamify anything. And a new trend that I've seen in the past few years happen is that a lot of people make games that are like, you have a very specific profession, or you have a very specific thing that you're engaging with, and then you can add narrative to that if you want to. You can add level design to that if you want to. A very good example of that actually is Five Nights at Freddy's. It is very simple. You're just a security guard looking at a security camera, and then it gives you lore, gives you story around that, and it all works fine. But just a simple idea that you're a security guard at a haunted pizzeria. That's the simple idea, as small as it gets.
Papers, Please.
Oh yeah, or Unpacking actually is a very good example too.
I mean, which are all phenomenal games, but they're very small. They're condensed. It's a very specific, singular idea, very contained. if you want to make a game, if you've never made a game before and you want to be successful and you want to sell it, start there. Because you can actually turn it around in a reasonable amount of time, and you can put just as much artistic creativity into that as you would into a massive game like what we did. The reason that SunnySide worked is because a lot of things fell into place that shouldn't have. It never should have worked.
Frankly.
and we just got really, really lucky. And I would never suggest to anybody to start the way that we started, because it was a lot.
A lot of effort went into it, as well as a lot of talent. And
a lot of sacrifice, too.
True.
Like, let's be clear. Most of us sacrificed a lot.
We didn't just get lucky and
no,
we're all happy. And
you know, a lot of us put in 80, 90-hour weeks. A lot of us didn't get a lot of sleep. A lot of us. So,
I mean, I went to a hospital.
Rainy ended up in the hospital. So I wouldn't recommend what we did to anybody. Even though I would say we were being careful and taking care of ourselves. You know, we worked every single weekend for 2 years straight. That's not realistic. You know, so don't do that to yourself. It's not worth it. I would never do it again. And the only reason we did it that way is because Rainy made a lot of really bad choices during the Kickstarter that we were stuck with.
That's honestly true. Yeah.
And, you know, so...
Yeah. Also, I do like to make a quick little parenthesis here, is that I made those promises because of a very simple mistake that a lot of devs make. And I've seen this being made from so many people. Because it's your first game, you feel like you are not providing enough to make the game unique. Now, the amount of things you provide is not the key. It is what you're providing that is unique. Yeah. So it can be one single mechanic that is unique, and it can be the selling point of your game. You don't have to put as much as you can in there to just make sure you're getting over the line. If you are sure your unique mechanic is going to work, you don't need to pad it out. That's what I did. Yeah. And SunnySide could have been much smaller. I didn't need to choose 30 characters, but I thought, all these other games are doing 30, 40 characters. I had to.
That was my fault.
Did I not have?
The 30 characters was me. I remember specifically messaging you, be like, "Hey, is this too much?" You're like, "No, that's fine." I'm like, "Okay." No, huge regrets on that. But like, I think what I want to like wrap this up with is, if you want to make games, even though it's how we did it, you don't need Kickstarter. You really don't. I mean, is it going to give you the money so that you can like quit whatever you're doing and just focus on that? Yes. But it's such a hassle. Like,
and it's so much easier these days to make money off of video games. There was a time
so much easier,
that you needed connections, that you needed partnered accounts and stuff like that to sell your games on platforms. Yeah. It's not the case anymore. You can make a lot of money on itch. Look at Lethal Company on Steam. Yeah. That game became the fastest selling game towards the end of the year on Steam, and it only came out towards the end of the year, and it still got the multiplayer award on Steam, if I remember correctly.
So what it comes down to is, like, one, early access on Steam exists. Do I recommend it for every game? No. But if you can make a kind of live service thing work, it could work. It's $100.
And people are a lot more receptive to it these days.
They are, but
as long as you're honest.
To put a game on Steam, it's not. Yeah. It's complicated.
That's your bar of entry to sell games on Steam.
But if you don't even have to do Steam. Start on itch. Yep. You know, put your
free
game on there, set it for money, and do your thing. Now, there is some biz dev involved. You know, if you want to sell games, you're going to have to register as a business. You know, you are going to have to worry about taxes in the United States. You're going to have to worry about taxes, and it might be true for some other countries too. So just be aware of that. It's like the second you start asking for money, it's not a hobby. And there are a lot of things that you're going to have to take very seriously. And I would really like a lot more of our podcast to be about that journey. Because, like, we already took up half an hour just talking about how do you get started. And there's so much more that we could talk about on how do you register a business? How do you set up bank accounts? How do you take care of the contracts? What if you want to hire extra people? What if you want to hire a character designer because you're not an artist? You know, what if you do want to get it? What if you want to get on the Switch? You know, how hard does it get on the Switch, or to get a dev kit? Or there's so much stuff and information that's out there if you go looking for it. But I think that's something we could really like advise people on, is like, please, for the love of God, don't do what we did. You're gonna be banging your head against the wall after a year.
With that in mind, I think that is the end of this episode, and I know it feels a bit shorter, but as we said, we're kind of changing the format of our podcasts now. We're going to do more of them, but they're going to be a bit shorter. So we are going to end it here. For the regular episode, we're going to have an extended version for all of our Patreon backers. So if you would like to watch the extended version of this podcast and support our endeavors in the games industry, and not just for SunnySide, but for all the other things that RainyGames does, you can do that down below. We do have a Patreon link. We have a Discord server for RainyGames too currently. It's all about SunnySide because that's the project we're working on, but obviously it'll expand as we work on more games. And I think, all the other socials down below. Thank you for watching.
Yeah. And thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you got...
Or listening.
Watching. Hopefully you got some good information from us. And keep checking back in, because we're going to try to be a lot more regular about these.
We're going to go through this one,
And
this is going to be a very big topic.
Yeah. That thing's to be like a multi-episode type deal. So have fun. Thanks for joining us. And see you next time.
We'll see you next episode.
Yeah.